Mr. Vinals, as always, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
I don't know what the biggest concern you have right now, because it seems there are concerns from left, right, and center, and there's just not really a glimmer of hope apart from maybe, countries coming together. What do you worry about the most?
Well, I think that what I worry is about the accumulation of different critical issues, crises. Not only for the global economy, but beyond. Of course, we have the macro crisis with the stagflation. We have the energy crisis. We have the food crisis coming in. We have the confidence crisis after the global security order has been shaken. We have the crisis in globalization because there is now further fragmentation in the global order of trade and capital flows. And there are also some cracks in global governance because the West is united, but the world is divided.
I mean, this could be a perfect storm for the world economy.
It is a bit of a perfect storm. And I think we've had big crises in the past, but coming from so different dimensions, this may be quite unique.
So is there a danger that politicians and policymakers get distracted and miss the big picture of taking care of the ones that have the least?
Well, I hope not, but when one focuses on its own domestic priorities, it may be that there is a lack of international action. I think that we have seen positive signs, though, in the way that Europe and the United States and other Western economies have come together in this situation. But I think that there are many other issues where we need more working together rather than more dispersion. And I'm particularly worried about further fractures in globalization. I think that's something that worries me a lot, yeah.
So do you see supply chains actually moving? So people reestablishing, and how much inflationary is that?
Yeah. Well, supply chains are moving from just in time to just in case, meaning that you do not only have efficiency considerations, but also resilience considerations. That's something which is likely to lead to higher prices. Mm-hmm. And I think I worry even more about the reshoring and the onshoring, because this is something which runs contrary to the logic of a global economy. And I can understand that from some political points of view, from security points of view, but I think the world would be much better served if one tries to get diversification of global supply chains in order to get the resilience that we all seek.
But what needs to happen for that to actually continue that way? Because we're also seeing, more than a fracturing. It's really almost a world split in two right now.
Yeah, I think there are things that need to happen from the public sector and the private sector. I think the public sector should not put in place policies that actively incentivize the reshoring. It may be okay for a couple of strategic sectors, but I don't think
semiconductors?
Semiconductors would be one case, but I think this is something that should not go across the board, because I think it is back to protectionism. And I think the private sector can do a lot also in order to make sure that supply chains become more secure, more transparent, and more resilient. And I think that the digitalization, for example, of trade and global supply chains, and making these global supply chains more sustainable, is something that will go in the positive direction. We're going to have the WTO having the ministerial conference, and I think that this is an area where policy should be discussed.
What's the role of banks in all of this crisis? Is there anything that actually your bank and other banks can do to alleviate the crisis?
Well, yes. I think that fortunately in this crisis, banks were part of the solution rather than part of a problem. And we have been very close to our clients, trying to help them, clients both in emerging markets and developing economies and advanced economies. And for example, we have been helping clients to carry out the diversification of their supply chains in terms of
through loans?
Different international corridors. And to give you an example, from Northern Asia into Southern Asia, in the first quarter of the year, our income coming from that corridor has gone up by 35%. So this is something which is good for our clients. We're helping them navigate these difficult circumstances, and there is a business opportunity.
But this is through loans, or is it what kind of support can you give for the economic transition, or is it actually helping just with finding the funds to be able, that they can electrify their economies and businesses?
Well, we can finance the capital flows which are needed and the reallocations of production facilities which are needed to make global supply chains more resilient, for example. But beyond that, we are taking a very strong stand on resetting globalization and working with many partners, for example, to improve the access of small and medium-sized enterprises to global trade by providing them with the services that they need, with the trade financing that they need. And I think, again, the digitalization of trade is something that improves the access of small and medium-sized enterprises to global trade channels.
Do you think China wants globalization?
I think China has benefited enormously from globalization. I think the world has benefited enormously from globalization. I think that there are two camps, as I see it in the world, those who want to do away with globalization and those who want to perfect globalization to make it more inclusive, more sustainable, more resilient. Standard Chartered, as a global trade bank, is clearly on the second camp, and I hope that reason prevails over short-term political considerations.